All right, ready to unpack Hermes, the Greek god, messenger. But there's a lot more to him than that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Way more to uncover.
We're going deep beyond the basics with some great sources.
Looking forward to it.
Theoi.com, always a good one. And then we've got a dictionary entry
Okay.
and even referencing a Croatian academic paper.
Wow. Sounds like a good mix.
Could be some curveballs there.
Yeah, definitely excited to see where this goes.
So we'll be getting into mythology, symbolism, even a little bit of linguistics.
Hermes was a busy god, that's for sure.
That's what I thought when I was prepping for this deep dive. I was like, okay, yeah, messenger, winged sandals.
Right.
But then the more you dig in, it's like, wait, there's all this other
You
shit.
realize how much more there is to him, yeah.
Okay, so why Ioi's Hermes so important? What makes him stand out?
Well, one thing that struck me is how he's connected to the practicalities of ancient Greek life,
Interesting.
like his role as god of herds and flocks.
Right. Doesn't sound that exciting at first.
But it is.
What's the deeper meaning there?
In ancient Greece, herding wasn't just some isolated thing.
Yeah, okay.
It was totally tied in with everything: travel, trade, even danger from bandits, wild animals.
Right, I see.
So then you look at Hermes being the protector of travelers, even his connection to cattle thieves.
Ah, it all makes sense.
Full circle back to the herds.
It's all connected.
The sources really show how those roles, even though they seem different, actually reflect how connected life was.
Yeah.
Herding, travel, trade, it's all part of the same tapestry,
I love that. It really helps to picture it.
And Hermes is woven throughout.
So he's this god who's overseeing the flow of goods, people, even ideas,
Exactly.
which makes the whole trickster god thing even more fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you can't talk about Hermes without talking about his trickery.
Absolutely not. It's like part of him from the very beginning.
And it starts early. Stealing Apollo's cattle as a newborn.
Classic Hermes.
So classic.
But it's not just about mischief, is it? It also shows his resourcefulness, how he can think on his feet.
Talk his way out of trouble.
Yeah, and invent. Creating the lyre to appease Apollo.
Talk about turning a bad situation into something amazing.
Right. Perfect example of how his trickery wasn't always bad.
Right.
It was often about cleverness, which the Greeks really valued.
And you see that cleverness in so many stories. Like, remember that detail about him using osier withes to bind the cattle?
Oh yeah, and then they magically root themselves?
That's how they explained how bindings for animals were invented.
That's like a mythological origin story for a real tool.
I mean, brilliant.
It is.
But also makes you wonder, was Apollo ever really okay with all this?
I mean, getting your cattle stolen.
And then given a lyre?
Well, the sources say he was furious at first, but
Right.
there's also this grudging admiration there too.
Interesting.
Hermes charmed him in the end with his quick wit and the beauty of the music.
So maybe it's not just the trickery itself, but what he does with it?
Yeah, he uses it to solve problems, even to bring beauty into the world.
And this connection to invention, that's key to understanding Hermes, right?
Absolutely. It shows he wasn't just a prankster.
Yeah.
He was the source of some of humanity's most important tools.
Okay.
Writing, astronomy, wrestling.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It goes on.
It's almost like he's this force for progress,
Yeah.
which makes his darker side, his role as psychopomp,
Yeah.
even more striking.
Definitely adds another dimension to him, you know?
We've got this god of travel, invention, all this good stuff.
Right.
And then there he is, leading souls to the underworld.
Realm of shadows.
Right, things get a little spooky there.
A bit.
He's not the playful trickster anymore.
No, he's the guide through death.
And that image of him with his golden wand.
The wand that can both lull people to sleep and wake them up.
That says so much about the ancient Greek view of death, doesn't it?
It does.
What do you think they were trying to say with this role for Hermes?
Well, for them, death wasn't the end. It was a transition, a journey to another place.
Right.
And Hermes, as psychopomp, he wasn't just taking souls somewhere.
He had a bigger purpose.
He was guaranteeing safe passage, making sure the souls got to their final destination.
So even in death, there was order.
Yes, a process.
And Hermes was overseeing it.
Exactly.
I'm curious, did the Greeks have any specific rituals or beliefs about Hermes in this role?
Oh, absolutely. They invoked him in rituals for the dead.
Interesting.
And there are even references to him being connected to necromancy.
Whoa, necromancy. That's taking it to another level.
Communicating with the deceased.
Wow, they really sought his guidance, even in dealing with the dead.
They did, even in those dangerous interactions with the other side.
It's incredible how much power and responsibility they gave to this one god.
It is.
Trickster, guide, inventor,
And
psychopomp.
almost like he embodies all these contradictions, right?
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
How do you make sense of all those different sides of him?
Well, I think that's exactly what made him so compelling to them. The ancient Greeks, they didn't see these contradictory roles as contradictions.
Interesting.
They saw them as reflecting the complexities of life itself.
So they were embracing the messiness, the ambiguity.
Exactly. And Hermes, with all his different qualities, he was the perfect embodiment of that worldview.
He was a god of transitions, of boundaries, of those in-between spaces.
Where opposites meet and blur.
Exactly.
He was the embodiment of the in-between.
And that's why he was so important.
So vital to their understanding of the world.
Makes you wonder how they saw his presence in their everyday lives.
Right.
Was he just a figure in myths, or did they really feel like he was a force at play around them?
Well, considering they erected statues of him, called Hermes, at crossroads and boundaries.
The Hermes.
Yeah.
I've heard of those. They're the statues with the...
Anatomically detailed, yeah.
Yes.
Well, they started as fertility totems, connected to Hermes' role in protecting flocks.
Okay.
But they were placed at crossroads, boundaries, marking those liminal spaces.
Right, where things transition from one to another.
Sure.
So they were practical markers, but then evolved into something more.
Representing Hermes' power over transitions and boundaries.
Over those in-between spaces.
Precisely.
Which brings us to a question you might not expect.
Okay.
How relevant is Hermes in the modern world?
I mean, besides the obvious stuff, like delivery companies using his image.
Right, because there's got to be more to it than that.
Oh, there is. Way more.
Like what?
Think about the word hermeneutics.
Okay.
That comes straight from Hermes.
Really?
It's the art of interpretation, understanding meaning.
Wow.
And that's something we're still dealing with today, right?
Especially now with so much information everywhere.
Exactly.
I never made that connection before.
It's amazing how these ancient ideas are still woven into how we think and talk.
And it's not just language.
Right.
There's the caduceus, his staff.
Still used today in medicine and commerce.
It's incredible that a symbol from ancient myth can still be so powerful today.
It's like Hermes is still with us.
Guiding us through this complex world.
Yeah. Communication, commerce, even healthcare.
He's a timeless figure.
He is. And I think one of the reasons he's still fascinating to us,
Yes.
he embodies so many parts of the human experience. He's the trickster, the communicator, the guide, the innovator,
He's all of those things.
and more.
He reminds us that we're complex creatures too, full of contradictions.
Yeah.
And maybe if we understand Hermes better, we can learn to embrace those contradictions in ourselves
I like that.
and find a way to navigate our own lives with all their boundaries and transitions.
That's a beautiful thought.
And it makes me think about all the other roles and stories about Hermes that we haven't even touched on yet.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to explore.
His connection to athletic contests, astronomy, music.
It seems like we could go on forever,
We could.
unpacking all the layers of this fascinating god.
So should we take a quick break and come back for round 2 of this Hermes adventure?
Let's do it. I'm ready to keep going.
So we've seen that Hermes is way more than a messenger. He's connected to so many things in ancient Greek life.
Yeah, he really is.
And this idea of him as a god of boundaries, transitions, that keeps coming up.
It's a big thing, yeah.
He's always moving between realms, blurring the lines, mediating between opposites.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder if that's part of why he's so powerful, so enduring, you know?
Could be, yeah.
He represents something we all experience, navigating those in-between spaces, trying to find our place.
In a world that's always changing,
Right.
the ancient Greeks, I think they got that.
Yeah.
They saw Hermes as this essential guide, helping them through those uncertain times.
So let's look at some more specific roles, stories that show this idea of Hermes as a mediator, a boundary crosser.
Okay, sounds good.
We talked about herding, but what about him being a herald, a bringer of peace?
Yeah, that's a big one. Really gets to the heart of his ability to bridge divides.
Because heralds weren't just messengers, right?
No, they were diplomats, negotiators, mediators.
Bringing people together.
Making communication happen, helping different sides understand each other.
So Hermes wasn't just delivering messages, he was building relationships, helping people find common ground.
Exactly. And his staff, the caduceus, wasn't just a symbol of power.
It had a deeper meaning.
It was a tool to bring people together, resolve conflict.
Which makes his association with birds of omen even more interesting.
The feathered messengers, yeah.
He's sending these divine messages, guiding human actions.
It's fascinating how the Greeks believed that only seers under Hermes' patronage, could understand those messages.
So it wasn't just about seeing the birds.
No, it was about interpreting their meaning, their divine message,
So Hermes was the link between the gods and humans, bringing messages, warnings,
helping people understand the signals from the divine.
and that connection to language interpretation, it extends to him being the inventor of writing, right?
Makes sense, right. What better way to bridge thought and expression than the written word?
Exactly.
Those early writing systems, they were often used by heralds, merchants to record messages, transactions,
Keeping track of things.
making communication more efficient, reliable, lasting.
So he wasn't just facilitating communication in the moment, he was creating a way to preserve it.
Yeah, to transmit knowledge across time and space,
And some sources even say Hermes taught mankind their many languages.
like a Greek Tower of Babel story, but more positive.
That's wild. It really shows his power over communication, how we connect with each other.
He's like the ultimate networker, keeping those lines open.
And speaking of flow, what about his role in trade, commerce, the god of merchants?
Yeah, that connects back to the animal husbandry too.
Oh, how so?
Cattle, sheep, goats, those were all commodities in the marketplace.
Right.
So Hermes wasn't just protecting the flocks, he was also overseeing the economics around them.
The god of the deal, making sure things ran smoothly.
And his association with thievery, Guile, that fits in here too.
Oh.
Merchants, like thieves, they needed to be clever, persuasive.
I guess the line between a good merchant and a cunning thief could be pretty blurry back then.
Definitely. And Hermes represented that duality, operating in those gray areas.
Which makes his connection to feasts, banquets, even more interesting.
Right.
On the one hand, he's the god of abundance, making sure there's plenty of food.
But then there's that trickster side, maybe swiping a bite when you're not looking.
Always up to something.
But feasts weren't just about eating.
There's a social element, too.
Yeah, power dynamics, chances to get ahead.
A clever servant could use their wit to gain favor, maybe outsmart someone in a drinking game.
Exactly. And Hermes, the god of social fluidity, he'd be right there in the mix.
Always watching, ready to shake things up.
The wild card, the agent of change, keeping things interesting.
Which brings us to his most mysterious role, Guide of the Dead.
Yeah, the psychopomp, leading souls to the underworld.
It's worth thinking about what that says about how the Greeks saw death.
Definitely.
It's a role that's both fascinating and scary.
Leading us into the unknown, where we face judgment.
And that connection to death, it's in some of his other roles, too.
Yeah, like the rituals for the dead, even necromancy.
That's some powerful stuff, communicating with the dead.
What do you think it says about their relationship with death?
I think it shows they weren't afraid to look at the darker side of things.
They wanted to connect with the deceased, maybe get guidance or even control them.
And Hermes was the key.
The bridge between worlds, opening the door to that other realm.
And this role, it's also tied to sleep, dreams.
Oh, right, the bringer of sleep, lulling people to slumber.
But for the Greeks, dreams weren't just random.
They were messages from the gods, or the spirits of the dead,
And Hermes was the one making that connection happen.
opening the channels between the conscious and unconscious,
So even in sleep, he's there, guiding us through those in-between spaces.
between waking and dreaming, life and death.
He really is the ultimate guide, helping us navigate the boundaries of our existence.
It's amazing how much depth there is to this god.
He's so much more than just a messenger.
Trickster, guide, inventor, psychopomp.
It goes on and on.
He's a reflection of life itself, with all its different facets.
And that's why he still resonates with us today.
He embodies those universal experiences, navigating boundaries, finding connection, facing the mysteries of life and death.
He reminds us that the world and we ourselves are full of contradictions, complexities,
Yeah.
and maybe by understanding Hermes better, we can learn to accept those contradictions and find our way through it all.
It's a beautiful thought, really.
It makes me think about all the other fascinating things about Hermes that we haven't even covered yet.
What?
His connection to athletics, astronomy, music.
There's still so much more to discover, unpack.
It seems like with Hermes, the deeper you go, the more you realize how much there is.
Definitely.
We've covered so much already about Hermes, and it feels like we're still just scratching the surface.
Right. It's amazing how much there is to unpack with this god.
Like, one thing that surprised me was his connection to athletic contests, gymnasiums.
Oh, yeah.
You think of Hermes, you picture winged sandals, travel.
Right. Not necessarily sports.
But it makes sense when you think about the qualities he represents.
Speed, agility, strategy, those are all Hermes.
And for the Greeks, athletics wasn't just about physical strength.
There was a mental aspect too, discipline, cunning.
Outsmarting your opponent.
Exactly.
So he's not just the god of athletes, he's the god of anyone who uses their skills to overcome challenges.
The ultimate coach, pushing us to be our best.
I like that.
And that reminds me of another interesting connection. Hermes in astronomy, the calendar.
Oh yeah, that one surprised me too. I never pictured him having a cosmic side.
It's intriguing, right? But it makes sense when you consider his family.
How so?
His grandfather was Atlas, the Titan, who held up the heavens.
So astronomy was in his blood.
You could say that.
So while he's running around doing all these other things, he's also looking up at the stars.
Contemplating the cosmos.
It adds a whole other layer to him.
Some sources even say Atlas taught Hermes all about astronomy.
Wow.
The constellations, the movements of the stars and planets.
Makes you wonder what Hermes saw when he looked up at the night sky.
Right. Did he see order, or was it just as chaotic as the human world?
Big questions.
Definitely goes back to how the Greeks viewed the cosmos.
And this astronomy connection, it makes his link to the calendar even more fascinating.
The 4th day of the month was sacred to Hermes, his birthday.
And even today, Wednesday is named after him in some places.
It's amazing how these ancient things still have a presence in our lives.
Often without us even realizing it.
Like a hidden thread, connecting us back to those old ways of thinking.
It's a beautiful thought.
It is.
And it reminds us that even though our world is so different from the ancient Greeks,
We're still asking some of the same big questions.
about our place in the universe.
Exactly.
And speaking of connections across time and space, there's also Hermes' identification with gods from other cultures.
Oh, right. The sources mentioned that.
Links to the Roman god Mercury, the Thracians Almaxis.
Even the Egyptian Thoth with the ibis head.
It really shows how fluid mythology can be.
Gods weren't confined to one place.
They could be adopted, blended, reflecting how cultures interacted, shared ideas.
It wasn't just borrowing gods from each other.
It was about recognizing those shared archetypes, similar roles.
Finding connections across different beliefs.
It reminds us that cultures aren't isolated.
They're always talking to each other, influencing each other, even blending their gods.
It's like this big cosmic dance of sharing.
And who better to lead that dance than Hermes?
The ultimate traveler, communicator,
You say, wonder if he went to those other lands himself.
spreading his knowledge, his tricks.
Hermes, the globe-trotting god, sharing his wisdom.
That's a great image.
It fits him perfectly.
And it makes me think about another side of Hermes, his role in music, poetry, even animal fables.
Those seem smaller compared to his cosmic duties, the underworld stuff.
But they show his connection to everyday life.
The shepherds, the farmers, living close to the land.
And the animals. He invented the lyre, the shepherd's pipe.
Bringing music, storytelling to the countryside.
And those fables with the animals?
Teaching lessons, exploring human behavior, entertainment.
It was folk wisdom passed down through generations.
So Hermes wasn't just a messenger for the gods,
He brought culture, creativity to the people,
weaving together the divine and the human.
creating something both grand and simple, profound and playful.
Beautiful way to put it.
And it brings us back to those Hermes statues.
Those figures marking boundaries, crossroads,
The Greeks put them at those places of transition, uncertainty.
where one path becomes another, the known meets the unknown.
Maybe it was a way to acknowledge Hermes in those moments.
Asking for his guidance.
As they navigated life's uncertain paths.
Or maybe it was just a reminder of his mischievous side,
keeping people on their toes.
reminding them that life is full of surprises.
I like that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Hermes, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it's that feeling of connection, how Hermes is woven into so many things.
He's everywhere, but in a subtle way.
Like a whisper, a glimpse, a sudden flash of insight,
The God who's always there, watching, guiding.
reminding us to embrace the complexity of it all.
He shows us how everything is connected, how boundaries are fluid.
The dance between the divine and the human?
It leaves me with this thought. Next time you're at a crossroads, a moment of uncertainty,
Take a look around.
you might just see Hermes lurking in the shadows, beckoning you forward.
Until next time.